Okay, welcome everybody to the panel. Yes, you hear me. What? You cannot hear? Now you can? Okay. I'm allowed to put two questions, so I put many questions in one already. The first would be, and if you could answer that, did you intend your work in any way to educate and have a pedagogical aspect, or did other people read that into it, and if so, how did you measure its success?
Oh, is it all for us? You is not for okay.
It's for us.
Yeah.
If you want somebody else to start.
I can start.
Legacy?
Yeah.
All right. Can
Yes.
you introduce who you're representing to?
Yes, my name is Legacy. I'm here as part of the Bruce High Quality Foundation, University, and this is Michael. Yes, definitely I think that the work itself, if you're going to call the school itself a piece of work, or a experiment, or performance, or collective action, definitely was intended as part of pedagogy, and was intended as a modus operandi of getting the community together to continue learning. So the whole operation itself definitely is centered around education and has that purpose.
And the measuring of success, is that as long as you like to do it, or as long as you have an audience, or?
I guess I would answer that question with the question of kind of like what is success. Those same terms are ultimately variables and are things that I don't personally adhere to as a model. So I think the school itself reflects that. It's something that is constantly in flux. Our modes of success or our points of success are things that are constantly changing, and so I think that is what is really exciting about it, is that the space itself is as alive as the individuals participating within it. So we continue to be successful as long as the individuals within it are continuing to contribute.
Jacob, could you?
Yeah, I actually think that pedagogy means something that you lead, and that someone is leading someone. I think actually it's some kind of Greek thing that a master is leading the slaves somehow from one place to another place. So I think we should be, or at least with the project that I've been involved in, we were very critical about leading anyone anywhere, basically. We wanted people somehow to come to terms with their own existence and the community they were a part of. So in a way, we didn't want to teach anyone anything, basically. But then again, learning is like a collective process. So you were learning together, and that was, I think, if you are, or we in a way didn't want to use the idea of pedagogy. That's, for example, what Capital very much want to, or the master want to. They want to lead us somewhere, and we don't want to lead anyone anywhere.
Maybe leading them to questions. I mean, that's another. But how do you measure the success, and why did you stop it? Why was that 2007 moment?
Yeah, success. I think there are different kinds of success, but I think what I value as the most successful thing about the Copenhagen Free University was actually that we were able to build a quite strong community consisting of many different kinds of people coming from different communities themselves, not only artists, but political people and just common people, unemployed people, teachers from other schools, like a quite mixed group of people there. And this community, I think what was happening within our space and between this group of people, I think that was, in my terms, quite successful. But I can't measure it in the terms of like evaluation that is haunting the universities today, like saying like someone got a job from being at our place. I'm sure no one got a job from being at our place. Someone gained things, but then again, like people use the power of the university, the Copenhagen Free University, as a reference to get around, in a way, getting into archives that are increasingly getting privatized, and you need a reference from a university to get in. People came from the Copenhagen Free University and got in easily, so that's a success in my terms. So there are like many ways of measuring success, and the reason why we shut it down was, in a way, maybe the more institutional success that we got, that we became quite well known in a way. So also the institution became too overshadowed, like the activities and also the collective nature of the project. So it was Henrietta and I, who was like living in the flat, became like representative of a community we didn't want to represent. So we wanted to destroy the name, but in a way we carry on doing the same thing in the dark in the community where we are still working, but no name attached.
Great answer. And how is that with you?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit different because we just brought up in our introduction that actually we do fail before we start, pretty much, since we, for instance, like the failure, as we mentioned, since we described our process of working with the project we made, to make it more explicit maybe, that the failure, for instance, were already there with the language skills, use of language, for instance, and this whole thing about our, persons being in different geography positions over the planet. So I think the whole construction was pretty much a comment on how do you measure this? I think it's pretty much impossible, your question to answer in relation to that, but of course you can always point down and position some place and measure, did anyone understand that about the flowers? No, or something, and that could be a success, I don't know. But
your motivation is still there, you're continuing this, do it, you haven't stopped.
Yeah, we're very interested in, to understand and to continue the discussion and the conversation and the dialogue about learning.
Yeah, we try to learning continuous.
What about the relationship with student movements that Jacob mentioned that is so important today? Do you have a relationship to student groups or more the general public?
In the work?
Well, yes, in your interaction with your work. Do you mobilize
Saskia,
student
use the microphone, sorry.
Are student groups involved in your work? Are students interested in your work? Is there a specific relationship to students? I'm not talking about you as professors, but just a generation that is interested in your work more than others who would also... Do you have a relationship with Jacobs Free University, for example?
Of course, in some way you can say there's some sort of parallelities, because we're talking about like defining things as learning, but I don't think, as I know, we're not related to a movement like that. No.
And Jacob,
but the specific project we talked about here,
yes.
Like that, when we work with Navdanya, they are using the work, they're continuing to use the work in their work, so to say, that they're using the little booklet we made, they use that in teaching all over India when they do their work. So in that sense, it's continued to work there. But I think it's splitting out in many different places, so, but not specific student movements.
Maybe it would be interesting to have another take on how you evolve your work and your practice specifically. I mean, you're part of the economy, part of capitalist society, and then again you make alternatives. How do you cope yourselves with doing this? There's no tuition at the Bruce High Quality Foundation University, is there? So you put your own sales of work in that, You funded yourselves?
I teach at the school, so I also teach here at Cooper. Is that what you mean? So how?
In general, yeah, how does it work?
Yeah, no one pays tuition. Come on down. You can anyone can come. It's open to whomever. There's no entrance exam or anything like that, and we run it basically on a volunteer basis. Yeah, at least I do as a teacher. I can't speak on behalf of everyone there, but I'm there because I like teaching.
Would you qualify for support of foundations or any governmental subsidies? How would that work in your case?
So Michael, to clarify, Michael teaches at the school and is an academic and contributor in many ways to the Bruce High Quality Foundation University, and I am acting as the studio director of the foundation itself. So I can answer to the economic question of how to support. A lot of the support comes from volunteers. And the support of the community itself, which has been really wonderful. Students and a lot of young people who are excited about art and community learning and collective activity have been a key part of keeping things going at the university, which we've been ultimately thankful for. And there are a lot of actually faces here who have attended our classes and public programs. And then outside of that, yes, actually, it is out of our own pockets. So oftentimes the sales that are made from works of art that are produced by the foundation itself, that same money goes right back into the university and helps to fund just basic operating costs, rent and food and snacks for public programs, and if the projector gets broken, figuring out a way to get that fixed. So things, they move at their own pace at the university, definitely, and I think that becomes very much so part of the culture. We're not a institution that is funded by corporations, or privately subsidized. So in that case, definitely we rely a lot on the support of our community and also on the support of the sales that are made external to that, and also large-scale events like, for example, we did the Brucennial this past spring and had a lot of people from the university participate in that, and there were T-shirts that were sold and other kinds of things, and those same things helped to generate funds that would go back into the university.
And how's that for Learning Site? How do you support yourselves doing this? Is there government money available for projects like that?
First of all, we come from Scandinavia, Sweden and Denmark. That means we come from free education, and we're actually co-teaching a half-day position. Then, for instance, like this, the fee from here, we're using for paying for storage, a project we're working on now that's going to be rebuilt into another situation. So
it turns, and Jacob, is there anything that you could say about how your economy works or worked?
Yeah, with the free, it never works. But with the free university, we were quite keen on it should be a part of the household economy, basically. So, as I said, it was a quite simple task to make the university because it was basically the place where we were living. And in a way, like also the projects that we did within that space was integrated within our household economy. So it was like a very minimal economy, and we earned some money at times to sell some booklets, but we didn't need much money to run the place. And like in terms of surviving, I'm a teacher.
We're going to take some questions from the audience at this point. Also, I'm obliged to mention that the Creative Time actually funded the Bruce High Quality Foundation.
The university. Yeah, I was going to say.
Not to intervene.
Definitely. Creative Time is also a part of the recent project. So we have our mixed combination of our budget is partially coming from the generous Creative Time.
It's all good. We ain't tripping on that. All right. But maybe we'll take a question from here. Go to Rebecca.
Hi. So everyone on the panel is here representing kind of alternative artistic versions of infrastructures for the academy, right? And ubiquitously, everyone mentions the idea of learning being deeply bound up with its community. So I'm wondering what we might learn from the way that this panel, that the different people on this panel sort of thoughtfully, rigorously, strategically identify and select its constituents and community.
How do you identify and select your community? I think that's what I got.
Right, so who are your students? Who's participating? Is that a strategic decision or does it just happen?
How do you select? How do you select?
We don't select students, they select the school.
They select us.
Yeah. So it's just through word of mouth at first and events like this. And it's very not selective in that sense, very inclusive.
Does that have its own limits or demographic problems?
Space limits, yes. The room's not very large.
Does it work along class or race lines or anything like that? I mean, do you, when you let things just happen, do you often find yourself attracting people just like you? That's not my. That's
Yeah, I don't
fine.
get the claps.
Sorry,
Yeah,
that's not my
people just like us.
I mean, I don't know. I guess, Nita, what are you, where are you going with that? I guess is my question back.
I'm sorry. I'm going to give it back to Rebecca. It wasn't my question. I was just trying to get to where I think she was going.
No, that's where I was going. Thank you. I mean, so if, Jakob Jakobsen calls knowledge a social relation, or Learning Site says that learning cannot be separated from the communities involved in it, or you talk about the importance of community, the Bruce High Quality Foundation representatives. Since everyone's here representing alternative practices, I'm wondering what's specifically distinct about the ways that your communities are operating. And maybe there's not a strategic choice about who's involved, but perhaps there are cases where there is a strategic choice or a thoughtful selection process.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm sorry. My English is probably too bad. I went to a bad school. But if I get you right, is it like I think we try to up there describe some kind of position that we're taking that is more about learning. And we say learning. We made this, this is like, we made ourselves two notions that we introduced here. It was like directed learning and learning. And we try to describe them in relation to how we perceive knowledge. So I think this is pretty much our answer, something like how we think how that operates in every situation also here while we're talking. So this was a strategy we're taking that is learning. And then, of course, we have tons of problems that we mentioned up here as a consequence, since we are coming from somewhere, and etc. That we try to describe to you.
Okay.
Maybe I totally misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you wanted us to comment upon how we create the community or perceive it, or yeah.
That's not explaining exactly that, which was that you said that you like to identify people in a specific relation to the site that you're working.
Okay,
But that was specific for that project we presented today.
Yeah. We were.
It's very different because we work in many different ways. Sometimes we work at home, and like we worked in, we co-founded M55, it's talked about before, and we continue using parts of that for some things Learning Site is doing. We have hosted people to come there and stay in a constructing we made, and so it's many different ways we're working.
Why don't we move the question up here?
In a couple of the presentations, at least a couple of them, if not all of them, I detected a tone of anti-intellectualism. And I'm wondering if you can address that. I mean, I think that, this notion that knowledge, because it can be commodified, means that all knowledge is a commodity, I think is a bit troubling. And this notion that if you hold knowledge, if you have spent a lot of time and effort to learn something, that there is nothing important about that, to honor that, and to this notion that we can just all teach one another, and this hostility to teachers, I think is actually reactionary and not progressive at all. So I'm wondering if you can address that.
Is it us she means, or is it?
Yeah, I would like to answer that. I can't see why common people can't be intellectuals. Who are the intellectuals then? Are they is that necessarily teachers or people in universities? It's I don't know who is the reactionary here then. I will say I'm not excluding competence and complicated intellectual thoughts at all. I have never touched that in anything I've been saying here. So why, just because we try to make it free and open and non-exclusive, then it's anti-intellectual, or what is it?
It's
Word.
I think from our perspective, I say one of the things that's really problematic for knowing things, or if you do experiments, is how can you tell other people what this is about? And that's what we try to do, is to work with, try to use a language that's daily language. So it's understandable. For instance, for the booklet, we worked with James Stapleton with that. He got really nuts about what we were trying to do in this text and put all these things together. But he wrote the text together with us, and he said, "This is it's actually consistent. But if I should do that in academia, it meant that I should use 3,000 pages in a book." And he could do that if that's what you'll see.
But is that what you mean? Is that what you equalize with anti-intellectualists? That is shorter, or maybe we don't understand what intellectualist is then, or
just going to have her a chance to kind of continue the dialogue with the microphone.
What I was trying to get at was this, the first presenter, I'm sorry, I forget your name, Jacob, I think. You had explicitly said we don't have any teachers here, we're all students, we're all teaching each other. So I'm not objecting to the fact that it's free. I think absolutely education ought to be free. And in the last presentation, there was this dichotomy that was constructed between there is learning and then there is knowledge, and knowledge, because it is a commodity, can be commodified, is problematic. So that's what I'm getting at here. What I'm trying to say is this hostility towards intellectuals, the definition of which are people who know something and have something to teach us. So just because you happen to be an acknowledged intellectual, just because you happen to be a university professor, for example, doesn't mean that you're not an intellectual and that you can learn something from that person.
I think an intellectual is a person who are able to think, and not necessarily one who possesses a lot of knowledge.
Well, okay, so we've got two different ways of approaching that. Doug, I want to just get Doug, just so you understand, there's only so many questions we can take, and I want to get Doug, and I know that we've got our online, I want to make sure we get an online question each time, because it feels fun. But Jason, we'll do Jason, and then we're going to do you, Doug, okay? Okay, so Jason, do you want to do that first? You need a microphone? Sorry. Can you get Jason a microphone? Sorry. And then we'll get to you over here, I think. We might run out of time. The music might start going. I don't know.
Hi. So this is a question from Scott Rigby. The panelists represent 4 examples of distinct creative pedagogical experiments, and there has been an explosion of artists who make schools. My question to the panelists is, do you have ideas about how more of these ongoing projects can dovetail or affect one another more directly than most are able to do currently? Is there a way to scale, I suppose?
I can speak a little bit to that. So I guess, in respect to artist communities, it's definitely a challenge. You live in New York, and there's a bubble here in itself that, while definitely a lot of people do know each other, and we're lucky to extend beyond our social networks to some degree, once those walls are up and having a school, and having the school be anti-institution to some degree, but institutionalized and just its presence alone, I think it becomes difficult to see beyond that. And so there are a lot of efforts to engage in communication beyond what's immediately at our noses. And I think Creative Time has actually been really great in working with us in planning towards some activities that will be happening next spring, where we're going to get a chance to go out and visit some other artists and other versions of schools. And so I think that, travel is something that is a privilege in itself, and, we're looking forward to kind of breaking down those walls and taking advantage of going past the geographical boundaries that separate a lot of the different schools and modes of schooling that exist here, at least domestically in the U.S., and getting a chance to continue the conversation, that needs to happen in order for us to get some perspective about how to grow as a group.
Can I jump in real quick?
I have a question for the Bruces.
I would like to answer that one, the other one, sorry.
Can we continue? Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Go.
With the Copenhagen Free University, that was quite important aspect of we didn't want to, in a way, be a model for anything. So we were quite keen when people, even though we had like a very specific ideas about how our free university should work, it was not just this kind of open hippie lounge. We were quite specific about the knowledge we were looking for and the topics that we were working on. But normally, like really dedicated people who were interested in our project, we normally said like the best way or the conclusion, if you look at our project, you will be the best conclusion of looking at our project would go and make your own university. And that actually, it was not a matter of joining the Copenhagen Free University, it was a matter of making your own university basically. And that actually made like a lot of these kind of projects going on around Europe and in many other places. So we in a way build this kind of whole structure of sister universities. And this basic question about asking yourself, what kind of university would I make if I could do it in relation to my material life? I think that's a very basic and interesting question. And of course, these kind of institutions are people's institutions. They are society's institutions, but we are rarely allowed to ask ourselves, what kind of universities do we want? And I think this kind of system of all these self-organized universities emerging around was quite interesting because they appeared extremely different. There were like all of them that developed were very, very different, and that came out of this kind of basic question: what kind of university do we need in our network?
Doug?
I find that the withdrawal of the Free University from a certain idea of the spectacularization recently of schools to be both poignant and effective. And I'm interested in how, in a sense, school as art is becoming more and more part of an element of social capital that actually fits into the commoditization of our work. And in particular for the Bruces, I think a question might be, how is it not just that the sale of work helps to fund the school, but how is it that the organizing of students into the school gives the artwork value in the art market?
I think that's actually a really great question. It's a complicated situation because it does turn in on itself many times over, and there are within the foundation space many contradictions, I think, that you've pointed out. But we don't deny those things, and I think that part of existing in a world right now is acknowledging those contradictions and acknowledging the fact that sometimes the same market, or the hand that feeds us, is the same one that we're trying to bite. So I think it's a challenge. It's something that we're consistently trying to fight against. But on the other hand, it is lucky to have such access to a group, for example, like Creative Time, a nonprofit like this, because they give us the opportunity to help to pay, for example, costs like rent, and that's something that provides a space where it keeps us from having to rely too heavily on those market influences and forces. So there is a balance. It's a delicate balance. It's something that we're constantly trying to modify and play with, but we definitely have it as a consistent part of our educational space and as a consistent support to our student body.
Because, Doug, does your question apply to the others on the panel too, to some degree? Or?
To some degree, but at a certain point it seems that, and it relates to the question about the idea of the value of the labor of educators, I think also, and especially in this country where this adjunct slave pool of labor is taken advantage of by most institutions. And I think it's an important thing to bring up in the idea, in relationship to the idea of free knowledge, that we live in an economy, an educational economy, particularly in this country, where the capacity of students to study, even at an institution like the Cooper Union, is dependent on the consistent economic disenfranchisement of a large amount of educators and artists. And at Cooper Union, for instance, 85% of the classes are taught by adjuncts, but they are workers without benefits who are itinerant and basically a new precariat labor force. And I think it needs to be thought of in relationship to this in terms of where is the capital directed, how do systems of value get built up by these institutions, and if Bruce High Quality Foundation is selling work for lots of money, why aren't they paying the students?
What do they become? What pay the students? Why don't they pay?
We are about to hear some beautiful music, I suspect, in 8 seconds. And we're going to be breaking for lunch. So thanks to the panel and the questionnaires. And we'll see you here after lunch.